Have you ever just stopped and wondered why we act the way we do? Why our lives seem to follow certain paths? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today with sociology. It's this powerful way of thinking that honestly can completely change how you see yourself and the world around you. So let me just start with a question for you. Think about the big decisions you've made in your life. What to study, where to live, even who your friends are. Do you think those choices were 100% your own? Well, the thing is, we're all swimming in these invisible currents that are constantly shaping us. Everything from our families and our education to the technology we use every day and the major historical events of our time. They're all pushing and pulling on our path, a lot of times in ways we don't even notice. And that's exactly where sociology comes into play. So, what is it? Well, to put it simply, it's the science of society. The official definition is that it's the social science that studies human society and social behavior. But I absolutely love this analogy. Think of it as a scientific, systematic version of people watching. It's all about looking for the hidden patterns in how we interact and influence each other. Now, to find those patterns, sociologists use this special tool, this whole new way of seeing things, called the sociological perspective. This perspective is all about looking past the obvious, common-sense explanations. It means seeing the general patterns of society reflected in the actions of particular people. And it's also about making the totally familiar parts of our own lives seem a little, strange, so we can step back and really question why we do the things we do. And here's where it gets really powerful. It helps us connect what feels like a purely personal problem to a much, much larger public issue. Think about unemployment, for example. If one person is out of work, it's easy to just see that as their own individual problem, right? But what if millions of people are unemployed? A sociologist steps back and asks, is this really about millions of individual failings, or is it a huge public issue caused by things like major economic shifts, automation, or policy changes? See? It's a total shift in focus. So how do sociologists actually analyze these big issues? Well, they have a toolkit with different theoretical perspectives, and you can think of them as different lenses for looking at the very same society. First up, we've got functionalism. This perspective sees society almost like a living organism. Just like your body has a heart, lungs, and a brain that all have to work together to keep you alive, functionalists see institutions like family, education, and the economy as parts that all have a job to do to keep society stable and running smoothly. Now, within this view, there are two different types of functions. Manifest functions are the obvious, intended purposes of something. But latent functions, those are the unintended and often kind of hidden consequences. Okay, let's use school as an example. The manifest function, the obvious reason for school, is to educate students and get them ready for jobs. Simple enough. But schools also have all these latent functions. They're basically a form of childcare for working parents, they teach us really important social skills, and they can even become the center of a whole community. None of those are the official goals of school, but they happen anyway. All right, our second lens gives us a totally different picture. Where functionalism sees harmony, conflict theory sees an arena of inequality. It focuses on how different groups are always competing for scarce resources. We're talking about wealth, power, and status. And it argues that this very conflict is what drives social change. And our third tool, it zooms way in, from the big picture to the micro level. Symbolic interactionism sees society not as some grand structure, but as the sum total of millions of everyday face-to-face interactions. It's all about symbols, like language, gestures, even emojis, and how we use them to create a shared reality from the ground up. A really fun way to think about this is something called dramaturgical analysis. It basically suggests that we are all actors on a stage. We have a front stage self, that's the persona we put on for the world, maybe on our social media. And then we have our backstage self, where we can finally relax and just be ourselves when no one's watching. So let's just quickly put these three side by side. The functionalist, they're focused on order and stability, always asking, how does this part help society function? The conflict theorist, they're looking at inequality, asking, okay, who benefits from this and who's paying the price? And then the symbolic interactionist zooms in on meaning, asking, how do we actually create our social reality through all these shared symbols? Okay, this all brings us to the final and maybe the most powerful idea we're talking about today. This is the ultimate goal of all of this, developing your own sociological imagination. This term comes from a sociologist named C. Wright Mills, and he defined it as the ability to see the crucial connection between our personal lives, what he called our biography, and the larger social and historical forces that shape them, what he called history. In his own words, it's this. The sociological imagination enables us to grasp history and biography and the relations between the two within society. Simply put, it's understanding how your personal life story is deeply tangled up with the bigger story of the world you live in. And that right there is the whole point. It's a huge shift in thinking. It's the realization that so many of the struggles we face, the ones we often blame ourselves for, are actually shaped and constrained by huge social forces that are completely outside of our individual control. So, I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Using your new sociological imagination, what's one personal challenge in your own life that, when you look at it through this new lens, might actually be a reflection of a much larger public issue? Think about it.